a sense of passion, being willing to throw themselves into life and the jobs that they're doing.
So what do you think the difference is between the UK and Bangladesh when it comes to education and educational sector?
The numbers of students taking even 6 or 7 years and session jam in some universities. So say I was going to work in hospitality and management, I'd actually go into a degree apprenticeship. I'd be employed already. I would be training and getting my degree. Chittagong was the first place I saw in Bangladesh, and it took me about 15 minutes to fall in love with the country. Yes. Well, the bus driver was, it was like being in a fairground, you know, on a roller coaster sort of thing. One of the things that a university like BRAC can do is to help connect Bangladesh to the rest of the world, because the truth is that Bangladesh has a great deal to teach the rest of the world about how you build a nation, how you deal with climate change, all those sorts of things. So that's a richness to a university like that.
Assalamu alaikum everyone, welcome to another episode of Smart Bangladesh 2.0 podcast. I'm your host Zunara Islamnova, and today I have a very special guest with me. I'll give you a second to guess when I tell you. He was the Registrar and the Chief Operating Officer of Asian University for Women, and now he is the heart of BRAC University. You have probably guessed it. Yes, I'm talking about the Registrar of BRAC University, Mr. Dave Dowland. So without further ado, let's get into this video. Assalamu alaikum, sir. Kemon achen?
Walaikum assalam. Balachi.
Thank you so much for being here, first of all. It was a good one. Okay, so let me start by telling you, how do you like the set?
Oh, this is a really good room for a conversation. We're completely away from the noise of the streets.
Yes. Do you think it's like
morning.
You're presenting a news when you're here?
Well, I felt as if I was going to help read the news with you when I came in here. And now we're sitting here ready to have a conversation. It's a nice space.
This would be more like a conversation for us. I want to ask you, how are you doing today?
Yes, very well, thank you.
Very well. Okay.
Getting ready to welcome new students to university tomorrow.
Yes, that would be wonderful. So my first question, which is like a personal question I wanted to ask you is, I think you know a lot of youngsters that you probably work with are really indecisive about what career path they would go for in life, right? So my question to you is, when and how did you decide that yes, I would go for this career, and when did it happen?
It's such a good question, because I think all over the world a lot of young people, they have this challenge being young, that you have a sense of so many possibilities and talents that you want to bring out, but there are also constraints as well. You can't necessarily do anything you want in the world. So it's a question of how you balance or bring together your talents and the things you're good at alongside the opportunities that you have. But you can be creative as well and find opportunities you didn't think you would have too. So in my case, I did a PhD in history, and it was about the history of higher education in Britain. And it's very interesting how sometimes a conversation, even a chance conversation, can influence you. Because I was thinking, what would I do afterwards? At that time, I didn't see myself becoming a teacher, though I've discovered that actually I love working with students. But one day I was having a conversation with another PhD student, and she said she was thinking of going to higher education management and leadership. And that clicked for me.
Higher education management.
Yes. So that clicked for me because I was studying it. And actually I was studying the history of universities, essentially, in colleges, that were set up for people who were disadvantaged, we'd say now. And so then I did that. I went to work for universities and colleges that specialized in extending opportunities, educational opportunities, maybe the first generation going into higher education or whatever. I don't think she ever knew how much influence that conversation had on me, but it crystallized my thinking. And so I went into higher education initially at quite a junior level, and then I discovered that I loved working with students. I was deeply committed to universities and what they could be. So it made sense for me, and I think looking back at this now, this is now several decades later, it's a decision that I think has kind of sat well with me and has created a really stimulating career. Never boring, really very, very stimulating.
Yes, it's never boring,
yes,
for sure.
But that was how it happened for me.
It's how it happened for you.
Yes, yeah.
So, okay, so you wanted to go for education management when
Yes,
you were doing
yeah.
your PhD.
Yeah, yeah.
And my question to you is, why did you choose Bangladesh in particular and the education sector of Bangladesh?
Yeah. Well, I've been working in higher education in Britain for many years, in similar position as a university registrar, that sort of positions, very similar positions to that. And I worked in a diversity of institutions, mostly very large universities in London that, as I mentioned, specialised in providing education for people who are the first generation to go into higher education, for international students from many countries, including Bangladesh, actually, all sorts of people, mature students as well, very close links to industry, and also a performing arts institution. Now, one of the things about working in London is that it's such a wonderful international city. You'll find people from every part of the world. And it was through working there that I started to develop some connections with Bangladeshi people, because as you will know, hundreds of thousands of Bangladeshis live in Britain. And again, it's interesting how conversations happen, because somebody I was close to, I was just leaving one institution to work in another. We got on very well together, and I said, I hope we'll work together again one day. She went to the Asian University for Women in Bangladesh.
Oh, and that's how you knew about it?
Yeah, well, that's how I'd heard of it. And I remember thinking, oh, I'd rather like to go and work somewhere like that and in Bangladesh. And then 18 months later, actually something interesting happened. I came into work one day, and it seemed just like an ordinary day, routine day, the end of the week. But it was a change to my life, because all of a sudden there was a phone call, not from her. It never occurred to her that I would want to come to Bangladesh. It was from a job search consultant who said to me, would you be interested to go to work in Bangladesh, the Asian University for Women? And I said straight away, yes, I would be interested to go to Bangladesh. And then she heard about this, and she was pleased to hear that, because we had got on well together. But then we went through the interview process. Within weeks I was visiting Bangladesh. Very intensive interview process, actually.
Yes.
But within a few months, everything was packed up. I had flown from London to Bangladesh, and I was here, and here I am still, just over 6 years later.
Yes, you're thriving in Bangladesh, and you're respected. So what I gather from what you said is most of the big monumental decisions of your life was something unexpected. It came from something really unexpected, like a call or a meeting or a conversation with someone.
Well, I think it's an interesting question you're asking, because in a way there was an element of planning, that I had thought about going into higher education management as a conscious decision.
Yes.
And then I think it would be true to say that I made good use of the opportunities I got.
Yes.
And when I was a young administrator in higher education, I was thinking ahead a bit. I thought one day it would be interesting to be a university registrar, because the role has such a, it's so wide-ranging in its the contribution it can make. And I started looking at job descriptions, thinking, how could I get the skills and experience that would put me in the position to, because in the UK, for instance, there are only 150 or so registrars, so it's not that easy to get these jobs. But so there was an element of planning. But I think I've had this wise advice from mentors myself, which is don't over-plan, enjoy the moment, and also sometimes listening to people, connecting with people widely in networks. It's very interesting how, as I said, say in London, you find yourself working, in that case, in a performing arts institution. It turns out it's a gateway to Bangladesh and to South Asia.
Yes.
So I think it's a combination of those things, to some extent planning, but to some extent a kind of flexibility of thinking as well, but yes, conversations with people that have sometimes given, opened my eyes to something, or opened an opportunity that might not otherwise have been there.
Possible.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, so that is a very good answer. Thank you for that. My next question to you is about the education culture, because
Right.
you've been working
Yeah.
with the
Yeah.
education sector from the
Yes.
first
Yeah.
time you came here in Bangladesh. My question to you is, how do you think the educational culture is in Bangladesh?
Yeah. So if I think about the universities and higher education particularly, there are some obvious differences. Well, one of the things that I found quite striking coming here is the influence of parents on their children's education in Bangladesh.
Yes.
So we see so often in universities that the parents' view about what subject a student should study will be of great significance, and I think you see less of that in the UK. For many families, it will vary a bit. There will be some groups where it would be, would be greater. So say some people, for instance, from a South Asian culture maybe living in Britain, you might see more of that. But generally the parental influence is very considerable. The idea in Britain that you might share examination results for a student with the parents, it simply wouldn't happen. There are actually legal issues about doing that,
Yes.
So
but in Bangladesh it's pretty
it
prevalent.
happens, yeah. Now, there are advantages and disadvantages to that, actually.
Yes,
you can,
yes.
but anyway, that would be another conversation. But that's one obvious difference. That is kind of quite striking. I think if I broaden it out slightly, just to think about culture generally as well, and we can perhaps talk a bit more about students as well. But one of the things I kind of noticed about working in a university here and in a work culture here is how all embracing it is. And I don't mind it because I'm dedicated to my job, but I think you see in the UK more of a sense of work-life balance probably.
In Bangladesh
Yes.
you don't see that.
No, people tend to,
Yeah.
people tend to be very much available the whole time in a sense. I think a
Yes.
lot of us are.
Yes.
So that's
Do you
quite a
think that should
striking
be
thing
changed
too.
in Bangladesh?
Well, I think it's one of the things I love about Bangladesh is, and I think I'll probably repeat this again later in the conversation actually, because it touches me so much. But the sense I have with Bangladeshi people, or many of the Bangladeshi people I meet, of a sense of passion, being willing to throw themselves into
Yes.
into life and the jobs that they're doing. And I hope that will always stay there, because I think that sort of dedication that I see from the best of the Bangladeshi people I've met is a good thing. So if you're constantly thinking about work-life balance and all this sort of thing, that could detract from that in a way. It's good to really be interested in what you're doing and to want to give
Yes.
yourself to it. But yes, I think to some extent, there could be changes, because when it starts to have an impact on things like, say, maternity leave or paternity leave, or people who are genuinely ill and there's a constraint on them because of issues of employment rights, that sort of thing. And people obviously do need some balance. They need to have meaningful holidays where they really can get away from the work for a time. So there does need surely to be some sort of development in the interest of a healthy life, really.
Yes, that is true.
yeah.
So you have been to
Yes,
UK. I
yeah.
believe you have had your higher studies in
Yes,
UK,
I did,
right?
I did,
Yes, and
yes,
now you're
yeah.
teaching Bangladeshi people in
Yeah,
Bangladesh for their higher studies. So what do you think the difference is between the UK and Bangladesh when it comes to education and educational sector?
Yeah. Once again, there are some obvious differences of emphasis. So the British institutions have quite simply had much longer to become established, and so the quality assurance arrangements are much more strongly developed. There's a much more developed view about the role of students in contributing to the leadership and development of universities, even in ways that are constructive. You see that things like, say, something that's very important in this country is to develop much stronger relationships between industry and the universities and the educational sector. That's something that is now very well developed in many ways, and there are some good models there. So you see all those things. But there are some things that are quite similar. I think all over the world, teachers in universities often say about their students that they wish they would study more conscientiously and consistently.
Yes.
They didn't leave everything to the night before. They feel that the students will not study unless they're assessed.
Yes,
and then they
yes.
over-assess them.
Do you think people
Maybe.
in Bangladesh do that all the time?
Well, I notice this with students sometimes. Not. I mean, I think there's always a core of students who are, who are very methodical and
Yes.
conscientious of their studies.
But
I
it's
think
like
the
a
same is
handful of people.
student.
Most
yeah.
of the people are
Yeah,
like
yeah.
lazy. They
So,
keep things.
but students are, and yet the students, I love students so much and see the talent that they have, and they make good in the end on the whole. But another thing I think this is also very significant is it actually takes much less time usually to graduate in the UK unless you're studying part-time. But a full-time degree in the UK, typically you'd finish in 3 years, maybe 4 years in some cases. And this is something to think about in Bangladesh, really. The numbers of students taking even 6 or 7 years and session jam in some
Yes.
universities. This is something it would be good to work away from, really, because you don't want life is quite short, really, and you don't really want to take 7 years or 6 years over a full-time program if you can avoid it. So there are more creative things that could be done. So I think that's an obvious difference as well, and something to think about, really.
Sure is. So
Yeah.
there's a thing which came to my mind when
Yeah.
you talked about the education, and it takes like 6 or 7 years.
For some people.
For
yes.
some
Yeah,
people,
yeah,
yes,
yeah.
because they have like session drops and
Yeah,
whatnot. So, do you think that starting a job or an internship early on life, like
Yes.
as early as the first year of university or even college
Yeah.
in Bangladesh, do you think that is something you would want to
Yes.
advise your
Yes,
students?
I think so. If I just think for a moment about the BRAC University model and then answer this question. So this is really important, I think, because work-based learning of that kind, internships, I think are vital. One of the great things about the BRAC model is that also all students are doing arts and humanities, and it's important they get a wider education.
Yes, yes, because like the practical learning.
Yes, and
is
the
really
critical thinking and creative thinking and arts are really important as well. So we are mostly vocational, because most of our students are doing science, technology, engineering, maths, professional development, but they all need that broader education about ideas, humanities, arts, culture, language. So we should have that. But coming back to what you're saying, this is really vital. So if I think, say, about a British model, that there's so much flexibility about degrees these days, and many of the students I worked with, they were doing 3 or 4 year programs where there was a very large amount of work that they were doing in industry. So they might be doing internships. There was even something called a degree apprenticeship where you would be employed already when you went to university, and you'd be getting a salary and you were studying a work, you actually, the degree was highly relevant to the employer.
Yes,
so say I was going to work in hospitality and management, I'd actually go into a degree apprenticeship. I'd be employed already. I would be training and getting my degree. And of course then the job is, the job progression is there. So there are lots of interesting examples like this. So I think this is really vital because young people are coming out of universities with so many challenges getting employment and
but
later
on the other hand, do you think that when they're like in jobs and working, when they're studying, does it hamper their education in any way? Because in Bangladesh a lot of people think that.
It's well, the old model was one of a full-time program of study. Where you would say, when I was a student, you would have quite long vacations, and but I think it helped to have some concentration of to be doing some kind of job as well alongside that. Now it can be constraining in a way because, for instance, people who are studying and working the whole time, some of the students, they needed to work in order to pay for their studies. So I think some of them had very long hours, and that did hamper their university life to some extent. But if you have another approach where you have a sort of structure of some work-based learning as part of the program of study, that's perhaps a little bit less likely to happen. But it's quite good to have to learn early on how to operate almost as if you were at work in some ways.
Yes.
So, for instance, there are one example I worked with of a business school where already the students were encouraged to be thinking about what it would be like to be in business. They were to see scheduled sessions as if they were business meetings already. They were developing the habits that they need. And actually work becomes much easier because you've been building up the habits earlier on.
And in BRAC University you support a lot of new startups as well, including TechSpire.
Oh yes, well TechSpire is an interesting example.
Podcast that we're doing right now.
Yeah.
So I mean, I've seen a lot of your podcasts.
Yes.
I mean, interviews that you have done.
Yeah.
And almost everyone asks you this. So, I mean, I'm going to ask you as well.
Okay.
When you first came here in Bangladesh, it's been 6 years?
Yes, 6 years now. Yeah.
6 years now. So, did you face any difficulties, the weather, anything?
No. Well, I had an interesting time at the airport on the first day, but just getting into the country.
You didn't understand the language?
No, it was just the airport bureaucracy. That was but that was a minor thing. I mean, I think what happened to me was I went to Chittagong. Chittagong was the first place I saw in Bangladesh, and it took me about 15 minutes to fall in love with the country.
Oh my God, that's great.
So it was easy, actually. I never felt homesick.
You never felt homesick?
No. And I just wanted, when I first came here, I wondered whether as an expat, my life would be constrained, that I'd find myself living in, working in the week and then living in an apartment. But very quickly, I found myself becoming involved with community organizations, youth organizations, as an extension to my work. Going to multiple weddings, and I loved Chittagonian life and the life of Bangladesh. And so it was not difficult. I got used to the heat quite quickly.
Yes. I mean,
yes.
Wasn't there any language barrier or, the heat in Bangladesh?
Yes. So the heat, yes. So the heat was, there was the advantage of air conditioning, some air conditioning to help with that. Though it's good not to have too much air conditioning on, because when you go outside then it hits you. But I didn't mind it. And actually, I was reading something by a Bengali writer recently, which I loved, because she said she was taking the train from Dhaka to Kolkata. And the air conditioning was on in her compartment. And she said she turned it off because she wanted Bengal to get to her, the whole, and this is how I felt when I came to Bangladesh. I loved the smell. And now the heat does get very, very searing. So I'm grateful for the air conditioning. But I was able to adjust to it, I think.
Are you adjusted now?
Yes, I am ready, but as I said, with some air conditioning to help with that, I mean, I think it's very different if you're under the full glare of the heat all day long. If you're working in an agriculture area or somewhere, that's a very qualitatively different experience, of course, so I'm not in that position. But the heat, I mean, when I came here, the mosquitoes welcomed me with numerous bites, and so I think they inoculated me, so that was another way,
that was like your welcome gift.
So that was a kind of welcome gift.
Yes.
So yes, I think that was my predominant feeling. It was a sense really of love of Bangladesh and wanting to get to the roots of Bangladesh and out of the cities into the villages. This is one of the great sort of joys of being in Bangladesh.
Did you visit it's full Chittagong when you first came?
Oh yeah, all over Chittagong. So first the city and then out into the villages, visiting colleagues, friends, all sorts of people, going to multiple weddings.
Did you have a lot of friends when you first came here?
No, not at all. In fact, I didn't know anybody other than the, one person who that I didn't know anybody else at all. But it helped to have the structure of being in a university, and it was an English-speaking university. So you see, there was a base there, and then through that, starting to get to know people in Chittagong. So quickly, the weekends became full of opportunities to be with people.
And Chittagong is famous for weddings, grand weddings, big ones. So when did you come to Dhaka?
Yeah. So then I came occasionally on visits to Dhaka, for business, but it was 4 years later when I moved to BRAC University. And there's a good connection actually between AUW, the Asian University for Women, and BRAC. But I came 4 years ago in the middle of COVID.
Okay, so you came in Bangladesh, it's like 6 years, as you have said. So do you have any funny memories or difficult situations or memories you want to share?
It would be hard to know which one to choose, really. I think, that it's sort of, I think I've got used to a kind of Bengali sense of humour, if there is one. But I suppose one of the first things was getting used to Bangladeshi attitudes to time, particularly outside Dhaka. So the first wedding I went to...
Okay.
Yes, I've been to probably 100 weddings
Yes.
now, but the first wedding I went to, you see, it said come at 7:30 or whatever. So
You
I
went
came
there
at
at 7:30?
and I was there early enough to help put up the tables, you see, so it was quite funny, and then so I got used to it. When they say come at 7:30, you turn up at about 10:30 or
Yes,
something. It's
yes.
about the right time.
And for Chittagong, it starts like at 11.
Yes,
when
11
they-
o'clock even,
Yes.
That's another thing, actually, I noticed about Bangladeshi. I mean, English people, there's a stereotype
Yes.
that we all go to bed by, very early in the evening, and actually dinner very early in the evening. And Bangladeshi, I think in Dhaka, people have dinner so very late because they're busy travelling, actually.
Yes,
But I
yes.
noticed how the emphasis on later evening, people having. So I've quite often noticed that people saying we're going to have dinner now and it's 11 o'clock, and I'm thinking, it makes me feel quite English. I think, well,
Why would you have dinner this late?
so
Yes.
yes, so the wedding culture, and but then coming to Dhaka, Dhaka of course as a capital city is so international. So you see kind of international norms in a way, and the behaviour.
I mean,
more so
people are
maybe.
really varied.
Yes, yes.
A lot
yeah,
of people have
yeah,
different
yeah.
opinions. Did you have any problems with your accent?
With
Do you have
my
any-
accent?
Yes, because a lot of people wouldn't understand your accent in Bangladesh.
No, I think that probably does happen to some extent. I think one of the most interesting challenges and some of the funniest moments come from having an English sense of humour, because I think possibly I do this thing sometimes of saying something which is meant to be funny but with a straight face, and people would misunderstand it and think I was serious, so then I had to. So with my accent as well.
So give me an example. What would you say if you were saying something?
Well, we make some kind of downbeat comment, maybe pessimistic comment, which is intended to be
Funny.
really it's a joke.
Yes.
And they'd think you were serious, and they'd start to try to say, "Oh, really? Did that happen?" or something. You'd actually say, "It's all right, I'm joking," But
Yeah.
but
You have to
that
explain
is-
your jokes all the
But
time.
that's an English stereotype that English
Yes.
people are known for saying these sort of rather. It's supposed to be quite pessimistic things that they
Yes,
would
yes,
say. But they will say it with a completely straight face,
face.
and it's completely misunderstood, and it gets
Yes.
quite funny.
Do you do that
yes.
now? Or-
Still, I do. I think it's in my personality to some extent.
Yes.
But I kind of watch out for the warning signs, whether
Yes. They would take it seriously, too seriously or not.
Yeah.
Yes, that's a thing to
Yeah,
remember,
yeah.
keep in mind too.
Yeah.
So you have talked about experience, and now, as a Bangladeshi, I have to ask you this.
Yeah, all right.
What do you think is the favorite part of Bangladeshi culture?
Something I mentioned already. I think there are a couple of things I'd say. One is that I noticed for all the bureaucracy in Bangladesh and all of this sort of thing, but how agile and resourceful a lot of people. You see it on the streets.
Yes.
I love watching the scenes on the streets. So there are all sorts of obstacles, and as you say, it's really hot, and there are so many issues, and there's flooding and so on, and people are just so used. I think Bengali people don't these are stereotypes, these are generalizations, but Bengali people don't expect life to be anything other than tough. But they're very
that's
good
true.
at finding ways round. And if I had to choose a national community to be with in a crisis, I would choose Bangladeshi people, because they know how to work their way through situations. And actually, I've noticed it in the IT industry that I've developed a lot of respect for the savvy young IT people in South Asia, how agile they are about finding effective solutions to issues where I think in my own country, and I'm not an IT specialist, but often it seemed to me things that we would take some years to sort out, they would be somehow short-circuited here,
Yes.
in my experience. I think that is very fascinating, very interesting, and a hopeful sign for the future as Bangladesh, finds its competitive place in the world. The other thing is just how lively, the sense of life that there is here, partly through, and I noticed this going back to London a couple of years ago, and it was great to go back to London, but it seemed quiet compared to
Yes.
Bangladesh. And I was saying this to somebody here, how much I love this, and she said, yes, Bangladesh and Bengal, they have a sense of the vibration of life, which I thought was a wonderful phrase for it.
Vibration for life.
Yeah.
Yes, so this is a question. I mean, it's not here, but I'm still asking you. Have you ever been on the public transport?
Yes, I have. I've been on the. Now that was quite. I've actually been on a bus and thrown around on a bus.
You have been on the bus.
So you were asking me up funny situations.
Yes.
So that, and I'm still in one piece. I didn't end up in the hospital after the bus.
I mean, it's really unexpected.
Yes, I've been on rickshaws, of course. I've been in CNGs. And also, I've been on the train a few times. I actually quite enjoyed the train. The train from Dhaka to Chittagong, in particular, both ways. For a really comfortable overnight journey.
Yes, but what is your experience with the bus?
Yes. Well, the bus driver was,
interesting.
It was like being in a fairground, on a roller coaster sort of thing.
They're laughing.
That was everybody.
I mean, yeah, it sure is.
So. There was a YouTuber who did a video of being on a Bangladeshi bus, and I think it went viral all over the world, actually. It was a bit like that.
I don't think I've seen that.
Oh, you should have a look at that, yes.
Yes, I mean...
he couldn't believe it, but...
I mean, it's unbelievable, especially if you're new here.
But,
It's like a lot of pushing around buses. It's normal.
Yeah.
It happens all the time. So I want to ask you something about BRAC University.
Yes,
so you work with students
of
an age where I would say their parents don't know what to expect from them.
No.
They are really indecisive in their choices. They make good decisions and bad decisions. So how do you feel like when you're around youngsters?
Yes.
Not just in BRAC University, it could be anywhere.
Well, they're making my hair go white as the... No, I love being with students. I realised early on in my first job that my first job involved being with students all day long, and I couldn't get enough of it, really. It's a kind of passion of mine to be with students. I want to work with students and for students, and I have such a strong sense of the energy and creativity that so many of them have, and also I think many of them, how committed they are to this country, actually, and they really want to have an impact, and that is so energizing, and it's a wonderful thing. It does keep you young, actually. I think a lot of teachers
does
would
it actually
say this
keep you young?
I think it does. I feel that it does, and I spoke to a professor well into his 70s the other day, and he said he feels it keeps him young, and I think he's young in spirit.
Being around the youngsters,
yes, it
helps.
does. Yes.
But isn't there any problems when they were like youngsters? You have different mindsets.
Well, I think there is, because one of the things we are trying to do is to say we want to be student-centric. In other words, we want to really think about the interests of our students. But one of the things we have to communicate to students is, if you really want to get somewhere, you have to, in a sense, you're a young person. We understand you want to sleep late and all this sort of thing. You've got to enjoy being young, after all. But that if you really throw yourself in and make good use of the opportunities, you have to have a touch of self-discipline, really.
Yes.
And to work with your university and that's the thing I think I notice. Every university in the world, I think, that I've seen, it would be true in varying degrees. I think it's only a minority of students who really do see that they've got a few years and that they need to make good use of the opportunities. So that's an interesting one that we have to think about it. And then at the end of the story kind of thing, you see some of those who have made good use of those opportunities, that they tend to do better.
Yes.
Not guaranteed, but they tend to do better. That's one of the things. How do we communicate that? But I think we can do that partly through young people themselves working with us to help to spread that, really.
Spread that truth, yes.
Yeah.
So you have been working with BRAC University for 4 years now?
Yes, 4 years.
Yes, 4 years now. So how is it like working there, and what inspires you to work?
Yeah, I very much wanted to work for BRAC as I did for the Asian University for Women. As I said, there's a connection between the two of them and how they see the world. But there were certain reasons. I'd heard of BRAC and AUW for a start in the UK, so they have international connection. And one of the things that chiefly encouraged me to work for BRAC is that it's part of this vast international movement, the BRAC organisation, and it's a very special thing to be in a university that connects to every part of Bangladesh, to 11 other countries all over the world. There's an office in London, there's an office in the US, and so it means we're working on some of the most important world issues: climate change, health, education, at all sorts of levels, good practicing governance of a country, actually, and all the science, technology, engineering, such richness to it. So that's a very special place to be, and one of the things that a university like BRAC can do is to help connect Bangladesh to the rest of the world, because the truth is that Bangladesh has a great deal to teach the rest of the world about how you build a nation, how you deal with climate change, all those sorts of things. So that's a richness to a university like that. Now, I think all good universities have got a concentration of talented people. So what I'm saying would apply to other universities. There's that special quality that BRAC has, that sort of sense of global connection.
I mean, I'm
I
not
think is important.
in university yet, but
No.
I want to be in BRAC University
you
after
do?
what you
Yes.
said.
Yeah. Oh,
Okay, so let's talk about students.
Yes, students.
Okay,
Yes, yeah.
so I mean, teachers, every
Yeah.
teachers want to have a
Yeah.
good relationship with students,
yeah.
but they also would want their students to respect them
Yes.
and love them as well.
That's the
So
point.
you are your relation with students is really good. You have a very good bonding with students. So is there something you want to advise to other teachers, how to make a good bonding with your students and how to keep that bond of love and respect?
I think many people, I'm always learning from other people about this, so I love to see, I think there are many students who have there are many examples of good teacher-student relationships, and they come from teachers who are genuinely interested in their students, and also the teachers, they love their own subjects. I can think of teachers I had, an English teacher I had, for instance, who really loved English and English literature, and it kind of inspired me. So these things are not that complicated in a way if you start off like that, you see. And you then, because I think students, they know when they come across sincerity, and also they need good teachers who really know their subject, who are still learning themselves. That makes a big difference. If the teacher is still interested in learning, still fresh ideas, that sort of thing too. But also that the teacher, you have to keep a distance as well. I mean, I'm grateful that you mentioned this thing that we've touched on a couple of times, the need for respect in relationships. This is really vital. So you cannot afford to be too approachable.
Yes.
So you need to be approachable, but there's always a touch of distance in
there's
the
a fine
teaching
line.
Yes. That you're not personal friends in a sense. There's always the teacher and the student, in the interests of the student.
And that seems to be the problem with a lot of teachers. They don't know how to keep that line intact. Sometimes too much or too little. Yes, so that's a thing people should keep in mind too, right? So I mean, we all have seen you during this protest. You have been with the students. And one of the most important things that they protested about is job opportunities, unemployment. So my question to you is, as a professional in this field, why do you think that a lot of students are unemployed in Bangladesh?
Several aspects of this really important question. One thing I would say, it goes back to something we were talking about earlier on, is that, well, first of all, huge sympathy for all young people looking for jobs. It's not easy anywhere in the world. It certainly wasn't easy for my generation. You're young, you have something to contribute. You make loads of applications for jobs, and unless you have connections, it's not easy. And it's exhausting at times. So sympathy for people. But the thing I wanted to say is that there are students who make life easier for themselves because they've anticipated, they've looked ahead to what they're going to have to offer, they've built up their skills. And I met a student the other day, an ex-student actually, one of our alumni, who said, it's very interesting. He said he didn't buy all this stuff in Bangladesh about how difficult it was to get a job in a way, because he said he'd got a job relatively soon after graduation. Now maybe there was some luck there as well, but I think it was mostly because he'd started working on social projects earlier on. He'd enjoyed his university life, but he'd been developing the kind of skills that would make him useful to an employer. So that's interesting. Now, here's a basic thing. There are some things that students can do to help themselves. So I've been on so many interview panels for jobs in Bangladesh, and it's so frustrating because again and again you get people who come in and they haven't thought about the organization. They haven't just spent even 10 minutes on Google looking it up to see what it does, what are the challenges it's facing, how can I convince the employer that if they take me on, life is going to be a bit easier for them. So that's one thing you can do. And this is really kind of, if you just do it, already you've got a competitive advantage, actually.
Yes.
So that's not difficult to do. Thinking about the organization.
Yes, that's something I would say that
really
people
important.
don't do
Yeah,
much.
yeah, yeah. But then beyond that, of course, there are all sorts of issues. So there are things about the economy of Bangladesh, obviously. You know, there's been an emphasis on kind of low-wage manufacturing, and I think it's well recognized. There's a need for diversification of the economy, you know, more high technology, high-value agriculture, that sort of thing. For the country to have the kind of stability that it can get foreign investment, and there are more opportunities. But then I think the other thing I just say briefly is going back again to the question of what we in universities need to do. So we know we need to do this, we've just got to get on with it, having much better links to industry, helping our students develop skills, making sure really as much as we can that they get some work experience, they begin to develop connections with employers, they get good careers information, advice and guidance from the word go, and that they begin to build the pieces together so that by the time they graduate actually there is an easier transition for them. Also things like, say, being aware of the markets ourselves, like say for instance computer engineers going to Japan, for instance, then are we giving the language training that they would need to help them go out there? That sort of thing too. So we know we need to do it, we've just got to get down and actually start doing this, and this is a national issue. All the universities, we must all work together to make sure that we do that. I don't think there's any shortage of talent, you see. This is one of the themes of our conversation.
Do you think it's like a lack of presentation?
Yes, presentation?
Yes, like in the interview board, they cannot present their skills properly.
So certainly, this is the thing that has struck me, that being able to present yourself properly in interview. But part of that, again, it's about research and listening. If I'm going to go to a company and put myself forward as a person who's going to work there, then I at least need to do some research into that company and find out what it's about and what the challenges are.
Most of the
how I can
people,
contribute.
do they not do this?
No, well, in my experience, it's very unusual for anybody to do that. And then they will come into the interview panels and there are gift questions. There might be a gift question like, tell us about yourself. It's a golden opportunity to not just to talk about yourself generally, but to link that to the job that's actually on offer. And to show the employer that I've actually done
connecting the skills with what they want.
With what they want. And
really
you increase the chance you're going to be taken on. So that basic level stuff like that, really, that you can to some extent train yourself on that, but the universities really do have a responsibility to help with that, and the colleges as well.
Do you think that would make the rate of unemployment less?
Well, I think it would help many young people who could be getting jobs in the existing economy and who are not doing so because of things they could do themselves. But of course, beyond that, there's to deal with the issues of unemployment as well, there obviously has to be economic development as well, and national development to expand the stock of jobs. There will always be a shortage of jobs. The other thing, of course, is often talked about is entrepreneurship, and at BRAC there is some very interesting work on helping people to develop their own businesses and also to be
Yes.
entrepreneurs. But entrepreneurship is different from developing your own business. It's about
Yes.
being an innovator. And I think that will only ever be for a smaller number of people, probably.
Yes,
But
of course.
everybody needs to be able to think creatively. So thinking at university, how do we develop creative skills and ability to see opportunities in markets and business opportunities, that kind of thing is good for everyone, whether you're actually going to be an entrepreneur or not.
Yes, you were talking about startups,
Yeah.
businesses,
Yes, yeah,
and
yeah,
we
yeah.
have also started a startup, which is
Yeah.
TechSpire. You mentor for us.
yeah,
Thank
yeah.
you so much for that, because you're a very big source of guidance for us. So my last question to you is, what do you think our team can do to make our team better and showcase what we have in a better way to the world?
Well, you seem to have made a very good start, you know,
Yes.
and I noticed the professionalism with which you're operating. I mean, coming to visit you to do this interview, you know, how you prepared for it already, and the way you had you set up the whole scenario was really good. But one of the things I suppose you can do is to think about the influence you can have nationally with the kind of programs you do, how you can highlight some of the amazing examples of people with good ideas or who are doing something constructive, because this is a crucial time for Bangladesh now, isn't it? You
Yes,
know, and
it's a time
how-
where we develop
yes,
Bangladesh
you know,
again.
how these
Yes.
talented people, many of them young, some
Yes.
of them older as well, actually, people who are older but young in heart, who can be connected together and who can help to, you know, it's a country that's absolutely bursting with talent, but it can become much more competitive, you know, internationally, and you can help make that happen. And also, I think, encouraging sense of social responsibility, which you can do as well.
Responsibility.
Yeah.
Yes, that's
Yeah.
really important.
Yeah.
Thank you again.
Thank you so
Amir.
much, an absolute
Thank you
pleasure
so much
to
for
be with
being
you.
here.
Thank
And
you.
thank you to all the audience who have
you
been
so
watching
much.
us
Thank you.
from the
Thank
start. I would see you again in another podcast. Till
Thank
then, keep your eyes
Yeah.
on TechSpire and Mohna Television's Facebook and YouTube channel. Bye. Assalamu alaikum.